We're working to connect a region of over 600 bridges between our lands.
Welcome to ASEAN in Focus. I'm Kaloy Tabunda from the New Era University ASEAN Studies Center. This afternoon, we're lucky to have with us today the Vice President of the Philippine Council for Foreign Relations, Colonel Alejandro T. Flores Jr., who will talk to us about the different issues concerning Philippine-China relations and other issues about the Philippine military establishment. Colonel Alejandro Flores started his military career in the insurgency-laden Central Luzon, where he commanded company-grade and regional units. Later, he had the departmental staff positions in Camp Crame, from where he delved into security operations and worked under the committee levels of the National Intelligence Committee. He handled critical roles during the onset and crucial stages of the Reform the Armed Forces movement that later evolved into the 1986 EDSA upheaval. He helped in the consolidation of various administrations thereafter and performed informal staff functions in various capacities under the then President Fidel V. Ramos and his military commanders. Welcome to the program, Colonel Babes Flores.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for gracing our program this afternoon. First question, of course, President Xi Jinping has just came to the Philippines for his two-day state visit. What can you say about the visit of President Xi Jinping? What could the Philippines expect from this visit?
I think the visit of President Xi Jinping is actually a manifestation of his desire to develop a stronger relationship with the Philippines and strengthen further the initial steps that they have accomplished, especially with the opening of, or at least the statement that President Duterte would pursue an independent foreign policy.
He visited China 2 years ago.
Yes.
And he announced there that we're pivoting. The Philippine foreign policy would pivot towards China. So do you think, have you gained fruits already about, from that visit of 2 years ago? Well,
the fruit actually will come perhaps later, but the development of relationships and the preparations for this fruition, or at least sowing the seeds has actually started. And perhaps that is more important. Perhaps what can be said about recent developments is that since 2 years ago, when the president said it, now it's the first time that the president of China will come over, and actually I don't know exactly what are the many supposed agreements that will be signed, but these are good signs, good indications of a stronger relations with China.
Okay, before the visit of President Xi Jinping, there was this survey coming from commissioned by the social weather station, which said that most Filipinos are opposed to the Philippine government's supposed inaction on China's military encroachment in the West Philippine Sea. And in that survey, the SWS said that 84% of respondents said that it is not right for the government of the Philippines to leave China alone with its infrastructures and military presence in the claimed territories. So the latest figures, 81% said that they did not approve with the government's handling of what's happening in the South China Sea. What can you say about this?
Perhaps it's understandable because it's only 2 years ago since we started this independent foreign policy. And it's very difficult for most Filipinos to understand the differences between for instance, territorial sovereignty and economic sovereignty.
Okay. There's a difference.
Yeah, there's a big difference. And so also, most Filipinos do not understand exactly when some islands are being stated as being developed by China. of course, they react as if that is ours.
Something very negative.
Yes, very negative.
See, it's part of our territory now, so why should China encroach there?
Yes, it's true, because we've been trained, or at least we think like the Western countries that suggest that we should be operating under rules and laws.
And under those rules, we should be in control of those territories?
Not really, but there are some provisions that says China should not be doing that. And I guess, I think most Filipinos understand that that China is actually, the actions of China is actually a bit excessive. And so
offensive?
Excessive. Excessive to a point that they think that it's not really...
that should not happen.
Yes,
okay.
that should not happen.
But there's a statement also from President Duterte. Sabi niya, what can you do? China is already there and we cannot engage in more with China. Do you think that's a justified comment coming from the President himself?
Maybe I'm not necessarily justifying. Maybe it's a realistic statement, but it's not. I cannot say it's justified.
So that's a pragmatic position from the President of the Philippines. Okay.
Yeah.
So what should we expect from China then? Because to counter this negative perception of the Filipinos, what should China do?
China is very weak in soft power, the exercise of soft power, and it's whether they have it already. They have economic power, they have military power, but they are very weak in soft power, meaning people-to-people relationship, diplomatic relationships, and cultural relationships, and many other things that, unfortunately for them, the Western countries are very strong. So they should learn from how this soft power were created by these countries.
Western countries.
Yeah.
Okay. The Philippine Council for Foreign Relations has a, let's say, strong relationship with the official channels in China, and I understand you were there a few weeks back. You visited there along with the contingent from the Philippine Council for Foreign Relations, and that's supposed to be part of the soft power diplomacy of China. So, were you charmed by China during your visit there?
Charmed.
What did they do to you?
Well, they introduced to us. They showed us Xiamen. It's a very
progressive city.
Progressive and modern country, modern province.
Yes.
And then we went to Shanghai. Of course, that's the supposed financial center of China. It's really very progressive and very impressive. It's impossible not to be impressed by, if you are already on the highest tower, the Shanghai Tower, and you see everything around. It's really impressive. And at the same time, the following day, they sent us to a very traditional village that has not been
touched by modernization. Yes.
And still, it's actually inviting a lot of tourists in the area. So, and then finally, they brought us to Beijing, where initially they showed us the museum,
the square, the Red Square, the Red Square, the Tiananmen Square.
Tiananmen Square is there, but the impressive thing is that they showed us how China evolved, or at least won over the other countries in their rebellions and then revolution, and then overpowering the Kuomintang, and how they are now where they are.
So you think these are small steps being undertaken by China to really to sway the opinions, the opinions of people, especially, for example, in the Philippines, we're so much Western focused, we're so much influenced by the United States and the Western countries. That's why in a part of the world, in ASEAN, Filipinos are more. We know more about the U.S., about the West, than we know more about our neighboring countries, specifically China. So, what do you think China should? Do you think it's doing enough to to charm the peoples from this part of the region?
When we first went to China, it impressed us that they were trying to let us understand them.
Okay.
And in return, we also told them how to understand us. What we were saying was that we're perhaps friendly to the United States, but we are not necessarily their satraps. And so we see that you are a big country, but you're not necessarily bullies. That's how we interchanged during the first meeting. And so we thought that perhaps China should be pursuing that kind of a relationship.
Soft power diplomacy.
Soft power diplomacy, soft power generation of understanding from a lot of other countries and a lot of other people.
But the PCFR is, we're more senior than the rest of the population. So what do you think China should be doing more with the other segments of the Philippine population at least? Do you think it's doing more? PCFR is composed of professionals,
yes,
highly accomplished individuals, but you're up there, but yes, how about the rest of the population?
In the end,
to counter this negative perception on China?
In the end, time will demonstrate that China is very serious in what they say. Perhaps when they say that they're going to support our projects, if our people will see that these infrastructure projects are there, or they are buying more pineapple and agricultural products in a way that contributes to the prosperity of our country, then, as they say, the eating is in the food.
Things will turn around for China. But still, there's this, going back to the survey, SWS said that China was rated poor in the September survey with negative 16. Although this is improvement from negative 35 last June. But comparing this with the U.S., the country's longtime ally kept a very good rating of positive 59, which is 6 points below from the last survey. So we see a certain change. U.S. is although it's still in the very good rating, but it's going down. But China's impression with China from June it was negative 35, and September it's negative 16. It's still in the negative 6 territory, but still it's going up. So what can you say about this?
In our researches, we found out that some of this negativity is arises from the fact that China was tagged as a sleeping dragon.
Okay.
By some of our previous...
So I read that in the history books. China is a sleeping dragon.
If China is a sleeping dragon and is now awakened,
up,
people will tend to think that perhaps it's very... China will be very difficult to control, or at least to expect something maybe good from them.
Okay,
because they are dragons.
Something positive at once.
That's right.
Okay, well, we will talk more about the different aspects of our relationship with China when ASEAN in Focus Weekend Edition returns.
Philippines, Manila or Quezon City is a popular destination. But oftentimes the hustle and bustle of the city can be more stressful on your vacation. So when you feel the need to reconnect to nature or relax again, there's a beautiful oasis just outside of the city called the Garden at Ciudad de Victoria. Some of the species that you can see here include hydrangea, snapdragon, and stargazers. They're truly beautiful. The gardens at Ciudad de Victoria are so peaceful, tranquil, and beautiful that it's become a haven for young couples and a very popular venue for engagement photos. The next time you want an escape from the big city, the garden at Ciudad de Victoria is a wonderful place to visit.
Welcome back to ASEAN in Focus Weekend Edition, and we're still here with Colonel Babes Flores, the Vice President of the Philippine Council for Foreign Relations. And earlier we were talking about your visit to, the PCFR's visit to China, and we started talking about increasing China's soft power, the charm offensive, and you talk about people-to-people relationship between China and the Philippines. Can you define to us what's people-to-people relationship?
Actually, when CPIFA, Council,
Chinese People's Institute for Foreign
Affairs invited us to understand them, actually. That was the initial impression. Now, the idea is to establish a people-to-people relationship. And in our researches, we found out that we have been, in fact, relationship with them for
thousands of years, actually.
Yeah,
I also did my own research months ago.
And I was even surprised that Professor Su Liping suggested that it was not only 1,000 but 2,000 years.
Yes, yes.
Anyway, they have perhaps other sources. But anyway, what we're trying to say is that because of our researches, we found out that our people, or at least we are not yet Philippines then, but at least our islands, people from the islands of
Luzon and Visayas,
Butuan, Mindoro, Visayas,
Palawan, Basilan.
Palawan, yeah. They were actually trading with them already. And some of our, actually, not everything was good, because some of our pirates, Visayan pirates, were based in Pescadores, they call it,
yes.
And they were raiding Fujian.
Fujian is actually it's a province covering Xiamen.
Yes, and so that was the result. And I think what I should mention also that one admiral, Chinese Navy, visited Sulu and befriended Sultan Batara. And in return, Sultan Batara visited Beijing to meet with, to at least
pay a visit.
Pay a visit to the emperor. Unfortunately, he died before he returned. But the relatives were allowed to stay in Sedong, that's an area.
Shandong province, actually.
Shandong province, yeah. And until now, they are there. The relatives and the descendants of the Sultan still there. They are intermarried with a Muslim minority of China. Actually,
this story is captured by one of the movies. I think it's
yes.
Ed Romero.
Ed Romero, yes.
Hari sa Hari.
Hari sa Hari.
So Hari there is one of the Hari there is of course the Sultan Batara of Sulu, and the other Hari, the other king, is the Emperor of
the
China.
Emperor of China. Yeah.
It was captured
Yes.
in that movie. So,
Yes.
and I think historically it goes back 10th century.
14th actually. Yeah, 14th.
14th century.
14th, yeah.
But the initial visits, the initial engagement, the initial trading between China and the Philippines, and the parts of the Philippines happened during the 10th century.
Yes,
These were captured in
980
the
to
history.
80. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, which means, 2,000 years history of a relationship with China. And we seem to have forgotten this.
Well, this is not popularized, and I do not know for what reason.
These are some of the untold stories.
Yes, untold stories, yeah.
And this was covered by, this was buried under recent history, our relationship with other countries. Okay, so that was during the 10th century and 10th up to the 15th century. Yeah. And I think you also have an account of what happened during the Spanish era.
During the Spanish era, the Chinese were actually, they were already traders here, present in the islands. But the Spaniards wanted to control them, or at least so that their influence will not be...
Contain them, yes.
Yes, contained. They were actually contained in communities. They call it Parian in Manila. And of course, there are others in other areas.
These are the communities outside of Intramuros, right?
Yes, yes.
And Parian, present Parian now is the Divisoria, Ongpin, Binondo area.
Yes.
Okay.
So
right. That's the present Chinatown. So it goes back to the Spanish era when the Spaniards tried to contain Chinese influence, so they confined them in the Parian districts.
To be fair, it's not really containment alone. They wanted to secure them against Limahong, who was a pirate.
Chinese pirate.
Yeah. Chinese pirate, and he is actually predating on the Chinese
communities, Chinese
businessmen. Yeah.
And then I also know that after the Spanish, you also did some research during the early 20th century when the Americans came. So what happened with the relationship?
Not really. Actually, maybe before we go to what happened during the Americans. Oh yeah. Actually, some of the Chinese scholars were actually praising Philippine revolutionaries.
Yes.
A certain Liang, Chi Shao, suggested that the Philippines, in beating out Spaniards and fighting the Americans, is the vanguard of the struggle for independence in Asia.
Okay.
The victory of the Philippines will help in our fight and put fear in the hearts of the white race.
So it's a recognition that really started the freedom movement in our part of the world. Okay.
This was during the time when they were struggling against the... There were rebellions against the Europeans and the Americans in the urban areas of China. And then another one, Ao Zizia. We have a lot to learn in looking at the Philippines. First, the Philippines is a small country, but can become independent and rouse the U.S. China is so big, so it should continue the spirit of struggle without fear of death.
Okay.
The people of our country must not despair, quickly follow the Philippines to achieve victory.
So we served as their models pala.
Yes, we were the models during that time.
And I also read some accounts na actually Chinese people who were here helped us in our fight, actually, in our revolution. They helped us in our war against the Spaniards and even against the Americans.
There were accounts of a certain Chinese rebel who joined the Katipunan and became general, led his own
contingent.
Units.
Yes. That's why when I was in China during that time, somebody said that you should not fight with us, you should not quarrel with us, because historically we were fighting together against all of these Western oppressors.
Let me mention further that Aguinaldo and Sun Yat-sen, the father of the Chinese Revolution, actually were friends. And Aguinaldo wanted to secure Japanese rifles and requested Sun Yat-sen to assist,
in the purchase of
Mariano Ponce, who was then in Japan. And he gave further 100,000
Aguinaldo.
Aguinaldo, yeah.
Gave 100,000 Japanese yen to Sun Yat-sen.
To Sun Yat-sen to assist in their revolution.
Okay, so we see that Philippines and China historically have been fighting together to, against this Western oppressors.
Foreign invaders.
So, wala. We forgot all of this.
We do not know that in our history. It's not reflected in our history. And so even China also will be surprised to hear that we were actually we're working together.
Okay, pero this is quite a revelation that scholars Liang Chi-chiao and Ao Jija acknowledge that the Philippine Revolution served as their model for gaining their independence from oppressors. Okay, so Aguinaldo, and then America, and then the Japanese period. What happened during the Japanese period?
The Japanese, again...
of course, we know that
Japan
was also colonized by China, and what kind of colonization they had experienced.
Japan colonized China, yeah? And so...
sorry.
And so, there were, when they were here, they really persecuted the Chinese. And so the Chinese, again, assisted our guerrilla units and maybe perhaps assisted in providing.
And there were some accounts that actually some Chinese joined the guerrilla movement against
during the Japanese era.
So tama yung sabi nila na we helped you fight your wars against the Spaniards, against the British, against the Americans, and even against the Japanese. So sabi, we should not be enemies. Kakampi tayo historically, but pero nga these battles have been kept, buried in history.
But that history is not complete because during the after independence, when we were declared independent, we declared independence from the United States.
United States, 1946.
The first, by the way, the first country that
recognizes
was China. That's the Republic of China under the Kuomintang.
Okay.
And so, but when the Kuomintang were ousted from the mainland,
they went to Taiwan.
So the Communist Party assumed. Our president then during that time was President Quirino, and he didn't like to be identified with either party. He wanted to balance his the options of the Philippines as a friend to both sides. But on the other hand, when China invaded, sent its forces to Korea.
During the Korean War.
We had to identify ourselves with the United States, and that started our very strong relation, anti-communist stance with
against China and our strong relationship with the U.S. So yun pala.
That was how it evolved.
So, and that thing actually led to the burying in our history books about what really happened with the relationship with China. So, in the end, we see that China fought our wars with us. They served us. We served as their inspiration in gaining their liberty, but they fought our wars against the Spaniards, against the British, against the Japanese and all other.
And the Americans.
Okay. So we will talk more about the relationship between China and the Philippines when ASEAN in Focus Weekend returns. welcome back to ASEAN in Focus, and we still have here Colonel Dave Flores. Nagkikwentuhan lang kami on Philippine-China relationship. So earlier we finished the period when after independence, we saw that the Philippines, because of what happened to, actually this is a Cold War thing, we sided with the U.S. now, and that led to why we know so little about our previous relationship with China. And so, what happened during the 1950s?
1950s, the Philippines, United States signed an agreement. They called it
Mutual Defense Treaty. Yes.
And next to that is Southeast Asian Treaty Organization,
so
amongst
of
countries
SEATO,
to fight off the so-called communist threat.
Mm-hmm.
And then later on, there's also this
in ASEAN na 1967. Okay.
But initially, ASEAN was not welcomed by the Chinese. They thought that it was just another SEATO. So they distanced from ASEAN. So anyway, under the presidency of Marcos, President Marcos, he stated, actually he initiated a pragmatic foreign policy that formerly was exclusively pro-U.S. So he wanted us to realign ourselves with the third world countries. The
Group of 77, tama ba ako? O the non-aligned movement. Okay.
The Middle East countries, which were then undergoing a lot of problems. And so, again, the President Marcos initiated following some signals of rapprochement between U.S. and China, he instituted the One China policy.
Okay, so which is China, we sided with Taiwan then.
Before we were pro-Taiwan, now with President Marcos' declaration of a One China policy,
we sided with we recognized the People's Republic of China, the Communist China. And then it says in your research that there's a declaration from Marcos in his 1969 State of the Nation address. Can you please say something about that?
In his State of the Nation address, he said,
I
reiterate the need, which is becoming urgent this day. Before long, China will have increased its striking power 1,000-fold. We must prepare to coexist peaceably with Communist China.
So, sounds prophetic.
Yes.
It's happening now.
It's happening now, and
we must coexist peaceably with Communist China. So, yung mga nagagalit na, why is Duterte like this? Ito pala, Marcos mentioned this before.
Yes,
we must be able to coexist, we must prepare to coexist peaceably with China. Prophetic word. So
yes, it's really prophetic, and
that's why yung statement ni President Duterte na we cannot afford to engage in any war with China. China is here already a strong power, therefore we must learn to peaceably coexist with China.
Yeah, and think of other ways, more productive perhaps ways to engage with it.
And then you also had an account of Imelda Marcos' visit to China in 1974.
Yeah.
What happened
1974, after his brother's secret visits to China.
Si Romualdez to, no?
Romualdez, yeah.
Okay.
The first day, then Imelda called on Chairman Mao Zedong. And because China was an exporter of oil during that time, and there was so during an impasse, the First Lady Imelda approached
Chairman Mao,
and kissed her on the cheek.
Kiss him on the cheek. So, charm offensive,
So the Chinese people were startled, but still. So anyway, that started the.
So they sold all to us.
Yes.
Although ngayon parang wala na, they don't sell
they're
oil
now
anymore to us
using
because
all
they need
of
it.
their oil. Yes.
Okay.
And then maybe as an aftermath of that, previously the Communist Party of the Philippines were actually tried to smuggle in three in 3 attempts, firearms from China.
China, okay.
Yes, and because of this charm offensive, as you call, by our then First Lady Imelda, I think the China has already stopped doing this,
so
assisting
they squealed.
them. And
in support of the Philippine government. Okay, so
Mr. Marcos.
yun ang sinasabi natin, what a charm offensive can really do.
Soft power.
Unfortunately, this is the weakness of China now.
Yeah, yes, that's what they're doing.
Okay, so yun, actually, this is the first time I heard about that. 3 arms shipments from China to the Communist Party of the Philippines prevented by China. Bilang pagtanaw nung, because of yung charm offensive na ginawa ni Imelda Marcos.
Stop na sila.
Okay. So, post-Mao China, what happened?
Well, what happened was that, siyempre, under the leadership of Deng Xiaoping, they have, instead of supporting wars of national liberation, they set aside the ideological imposition and focus on more on economic strategies to develop, and a lot of these perhaps are not necessarily consistent with their communist principles.
Yes.
But
this led to the
expansion
of their economy and to where they are now.
Yes.
The second largest economy in the world, and the one who is challenging U.S. hegemony in this area. If not already, if they're not still if they're not yet the hegemon in this area. Okay, so where are we now after that post-Mao China? So China is now. So we see some actions of China which many people consider as aggressive because what they're doing in the South China
Sea. As a result of this initiative, the economic reforms of Mr. Deng Xiaoping, China, of course, experienced double-digit growth in its economy.
And they were able to lift 700 million people
from
out of poverty.
Yeah.
No country has ever done that.
Ever done that, of course. And unfortunately, the Philippines, despite the fact that it is supposed to inherit or at least be the beneficiary of this rapprochement. And the change in China's focus or the emphasis, we instead of developing so much, we only develop so little. So
we didn't really gain
there is
China's resurgence.
Yes, and that is being by some scholars are thinking that perhaps perhaps tayo may kasalanan, or some of us, we could be blamed by
our over-dependence
to our previous.
Okay, pero we will talk more about the recent developments in between China and the Philippines and all other issues. Since you are a former military man, I assume you can help us shed light on some issues concerning Philippine matters naman.
I will try to, but I'm not really competent in some of these areas.
Okay, we will try to. Okay.
Thank you.
ASEAN in Focus, Weekend Edition, will be back.
Health is our most important asset, and it should always be a constant effort to seek ways to take care of it. That includes professional medical help from the best available. The Manila-Beijing Medical Associated Incorporated is known as one of the most specialized centers in medical services.
yung sa cellphone, laptop, saka tablet.
Kaya po minsan po, pag bumibili po talaga ng mga gadgets, dapat alam po natin ang durability ng gadgets na bibili natin.
Mas maganda, Android ba or di ba, or yung iOS na sinasabi?
Bili ako ng bagong phone or what, ano bang kailangan kong tingnan sa phone? Ano pinaka-importante yung feature ba or what?
Health is our most important.
Welcome back to ASEAN in Focus Weekend Edition, and we're still here with Colonel Babes Flores. And earlier during our first three segments, we talked about the history of our relationships with China, and we see that China has supported us in many of our historical undertakings since they have been trading with us since the 10th century. And they helped us fought our wars against our foreign aggressors. But now we have a new China, and then it's now it's a dragon that has waken up, and it's exerting its influence all over the region. And then we go to the Philippines. Okay, so during the last many decades, we were under the wings of the U.S. and we drove them away. They left after we abrogated the treaty, the U.S. bases treaty. And when they left us, we don't have any external security capability. As a former military man, what happened? How do you explain this?
Well, perhaps we acted very fast in
driving them out,
driving the Americans out of the bases. Because if we were given a chance, we should have developed our capabilities first, or even long before we knew that they will be getting out of the bases. So, what we should have done was to develop our credible capabilities in terms of naval and air and.
Yeah, but di ba dapat US should have helped us?
Yes,
while they were still here.
There should have been that.
Transfer of
actually, because they were using our bases, they were supposed to be paying for it. And there was a time when Marcos was even saying that, I mean, he demanded that greater amounts be paid by the Americans. But I think, you know, I have some experiences in negotiations, and I thought that perhaps our previous leaders did not really research much on how to extract more concessions from the Americans.
Kasi di ba we hosted their bases Diba? And then when we compare their assistance, the assistance they gave to the Philippines to the assistance they gave to other countries which do not host bases, parang barya-barya lang yung binigay sa... Why did that happen?
Maybe similarly situated, not necessarily, kasi siyempre, if their priority is something else, then they put more money to it. For instance, the case of Israel, di ba?
Yeah.
Israel knows how to wangle things from them.
They're getting billions while getting cents.
Yes. Washington kasi, daming mga Jews. They have so many people there. And there are many American Jews also.
But we have the bases here. We could have,
I'm going there actually. I just want to mention also Turkey. Turkey, for instance, house many of their facilities, similar to what the Philippines said. But there were even provisions for Turkey to be if there are loans that need to be paid and
they cannot pay,
and Turkey defaulted, it was the DoD, Defense U.S. Department,
who will pay for
it. So what we're saying is, if other countries were able to do it, perhaps we could have if we knew how to deal with Washington D.C. because Washington D.C. is not only the party in power or not only the president. It's composed of all the interest groups. So you have to deal with all of them to agree with your proposal. So I think we were weak on that. We failed to...
It's not that they took us, the Americans took us very lightly.
I do not know exactly, but perhaps including that also, maybe. Yeah.
Kasi when you look at the scheme of things and how they disposed of resources, they were here. They practically used us as the staging ground for the Cold War, and we just got pittance.
I would like to blame the Americans alone, but what I'd like to say is that may problema rin sa atin from our end. So it's about a failure of our leaders and also maybe some of them also.
Ngayon, US is pulling back. Actually, you now have China here as the strongest, as one of the strongest.
No, militarily, still the United States. They are far more superior to the U.S.
But can we still get concessions from them, from the U.S.?
Of course, we can still. I think especially with the personality of our president, I think. Sabi naman ni Mr. President is a friend for all, an enemy to no one. So I guess, how can you,
yung mga recent statements niya, complete turnaround when President Obama was the President of the United States.
Yeah.
So what can you say about President Duterte's policy now towards the U.S.?
That's still again, a pragmatic one. If there are some favorable things, then he changes his perspective about it, insights. And the good thing about him is he talks freely and
no holds barred.
No holds barred. So you can understand what he really meant.
Okay, the Americans returned the Balangiga bells.
Yes.
Okay, what is that saying?
Very significant, because it's one way of saying that they committed these perhaps some atrocities, and that they are willing to, because let me just give you an idea of how military men look, especially the Americans. They look at this as spoils of war.
Okay.
And they signify, to them, it signifies a lot of things, especially heroism of their people. Many U.S. soldiers died in that incident. And so, giving it back will entail a lot of process for them.
Dishonor, parang yung dishonor their dead soldiers.
I was asked by a friend, a member of the veterans, U.S. veterans, and we said that they were even thinking of giving it to the religious, to the Catholic Church, or to the government. And I suggested that perhaps it would be better if it's the government rather than the religious, because
Yes, yes.
That's a very reconciliatory
gesture.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the return comes at a time when we are when we already have this warm relationship with China. Di ba parang
it's okay.
How do you read that?
I think it's just okay. When you have a policy that you're a friend to everybody, I think that's still okay. Yeah.
Okay, under the Duterte administration, where is our military establishment going?
The military establishment is developing very on its pace to achieve a what we call a capability that is respectable.
Yes.
We call it.
We're developing our what do you call that? Anyway, we're developing our capacity to really
enforce
respond,
our rights. For instance, our
external security.
External security in terms of air and navy. We're trying to cover our because of the recent developments, we have actually added a lot of duties or responsibilities to our armed forces, especially in the external. The South China Sea alone is very difficult. And then we have the Benham Rise.
Yes.
Which is...
we need to secure that also.
Yeah. And that's larger than Luzon itself.
Yes.
And then, of course, we have the southern backdoor. It is a very porous area.
Yeah, where the terrorists, where the Muslim terrorists enter. Okay.
By the way, China is also interested in developing the capability to secure that area because that has become problematic. And they have interest actually in pursuing the development or pushing forward the concept of BIMP-IAGA.
Yes.
And so I think that's a very positive step that China will take. And perhaps also it will lessen some of the problems they have with Indonesia and other countries. Yeah.
Okay. Other issues in our military establishment were President Duterte is buying arms from Russia and China, and you have these negative reactions from the U.S. According to them, that's not compatible with your hardware, with your capability. What can you say about that?
Non-operationability. Yes, actually, that is a term being used by the Americans too, because we are actually working together in a lot of exercises.
Balikatan exercises.
And supposedly, when you are fighting side by side, you can make use of your weapons as well as the weapon of your allies. So that's the concept of interoperability.
Okay.
But on the other hand,
is that true? Sa pag-purchase naman natin sa arms from Russia and China.
But the problem is they would not like to sell. Where there was a mention that some lawmakers of the United States doesn't like to sell to the Philippines. We cannot allow that to happen. I mean, if you're a commander-in-chief and your people are already fighting in the front, you cannot allow them not to have arms.
And it's our money anyway.
It's our money.
So do you think? So you think that the comments coming from the U.S. is not justified?
Yes, and some think that they still think of us as their colony. Which is not very acceptable.
Kaya nagre-react din ng China. You have all this history through generations, across centuries. Now we were fighting side by side, and now it's buried under the history books. So where do you think the military establishment is going from here?
It's going to be very professional, very capable, and I think we have very good leaders. I talked to a lot of them, most of the commanding generals and the chief of staff, and they're all very good. It will be very difficult to find or to look for people like them in any of the countries.
In terms of level of professionalism?
They are also very professional. They are very well trained. They are virtually... They underwent a lot of real field work. They fought our enemies in the as lieutenants and as senior field officers. So they saw the problems in the field, including the problems of our people who were actually embroiled in the conflict, not of their own choosing. And so they are now able to relate with them and recommend many policies that actually favor even our, not only the military, but especially the people that are affected by the conflicts.
Okay, you were there when the Reform the Armed Forces movement was starting, and you know what they did. Do you think our present military establishment will do another coup d'etats?
I think it will be very difficult for them to succeed if ever there is a
elements.
attempt.
Yes.
Yeah. Because the Philippine military and the police, the Coast Guard, they're all meshed together now, and they are working very as one. So the morale is very high, and of course there are some problems, but I don't think this will prevent, or at least they will entice them to join a coup attempt or similar.
So they will rally behind the Constitution.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. You're there.
Between the leadership and the Constitution, but do you think they will side? I'm sorry, it's a very controversial question.
I don't see any conflict.
Okay.
I don't see any conflict between leadership and Constitution.
Yeah, okay. So we see a military that's really very professional.
Yes, very professional.
And the capability growing, and
yes,
we're opening up our engagements not only with our traditional ally, the Western powers, but also with the newfound allies, Russia and China.
Yes.
So, and you're hoping, you have very good hope for the country.
Yes,
for the military.
yes. I have very high hopes for our country.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you very much, Colonel Flores. Thank you
Yes,
very
sir.
much for gracing this program, and we hope you will be here in one of our future episodes. Okay, that's all for now. I'm Kaloy Tabunda, and I'm one with 25.